that that man's going for a weapon.
You see this on the video?
Yes.
All right, for more on the verdict, let's turn to CBS News legal analyst Rikki Klieman. Rikki, were you surprised by the not guilty verdict?
I won't say I was surprised in the sense of shock, but certainly this was a case where it could have gone either way. I think there was a great deal of pretrial publicity about this case on both sides, but a lot of publicity that this shooting was different, that somehow because of the video that there may have been an expectation by many that there might have been a conviction. What you have is always the difficulty in these types of cases. You have a burden of proof on the prosecution to prove that a police officer did not act in reasonable use of self-defense or defense of another beyond a reasonable doubt. So it's often very difficult because the burden of proof is not on the defense to show that they proved why they acted. The other factor in all of this is you must look at what the definition is. You know, police officers and the military are the only two personnel who are allowed by society to use deadly force in a way that a normal citizen cannot use it. So here, what is the reasonable belief of that police officer? And what you have probably that was the turning point was her testimony of her seeing Mr. Crutcher allegedly reach inside for something. And I think that that may have made the difference. Remember, too, when you look at burden of proof, you have to have 12 people who will come to a conclusion that the prosecution met its burden beyond a reasonable doubt. It doesn't mean that the officer is innocent. It means that the prosecution could not prove them guilty.
Right, and you know, you talked a little bit about the publicity. There was a lot of media coverage. The jury was not sequestered. We saw a little bit of the 60 Minutes piece, which was an excellent piece, but I know that Bill Whitaker was both praised and heavily criticized. It was people were very emotional about this case. Do you think that maybe the media may have had an influence?
Well, I'd like to hope the media did not have an influence. You know, jurors are interesting creatures. We people who become jurors, where whatever walk of life we have, whatever job or lack of job, whatever our station is in life, if we're picked to sit on a jury, we bring our natural biases into the jury room. We also bring what we know or we've seen into the jury room. You can't erase things from your mind. Nevertheless, there have been a myriad of studies on jury deliberations and doing it through a mock trial setting. And what we find in those jury studies is that jurors take their responsibility very, very seriously. And most times that they are able to reach a conclusion that casts aside things like the media.
So we've seen in the video there, the Crutcher family is stunned. What options are still available to them? Well, the option that is always available is the wrongful death suit. And you get justice in certain ways. You get justice as a surviving relative of a victim of a crime, but through the means of, you believe, through a conviction, or the means of money damages through a suit. And you also have to see what ultimately will happen to this officer, if anything greater than her initial suspension. And in light of this, I think it was the prosecutor had spoken out after the verdict, and in the interview it was very interesting to see where a prosecutor has to really, in essence, take his or her lumps. That this was a jury that was black, that was white, this was a jury of men and women. So it's not like you came in there with a jury of 12 white males. Right. That's not what happened here. And the most important thing is for that police department and other police departments across the country to learn from each of these tragedies. These are tragedies. The mere taking of a life is a tragedy. Yeah. And that we learn as to retraining police officers in use of force. And that, of course, has become a national movement.
Could the outcome of this case have an impact on any civil cases? Any civil suits they may file?
Well, civil suits would always hope there was a conviction, because the conviction gets introduced, and of course the burden of proof in a criminal case is high. It is proof beyond a reasonable doubt, or in those scales of justice, it's proof way up here. In a civil suit, in the scales of justice, it's just a feather. So in the case that it's lost, as in this case, there is an acquittal, despite the fact that you had jurors crying in the box. So you know that this was a lot of turmoil for these jurors, that ultimately a civil suit is much easier to prove.
Rikki Klieman, you've been very busy with us today. Thank you very much for your insight.
It's always my pleasure.
We appreciate it as always. Thank you, Rikki.